My name is Carrie A. Olson and I teach in Denver Public Schools. I'm a middle school teacher. I teach at a school that's about a 100% government assistance, and I've been teaching in Denver Public Schools for 25 years. In 1993, I started by taking my fifth graders to the Holocaust Memorial Museum the year that it opened to culminate the study of the Holocaust. And I've been traveling with students ever since. We've been going to Washington, D.C. to the museum for the past 18 years, and we're now started going to Europe. We've been to Europe for the last 8 years. I teach about the Holocaust in an area to students that otherwise wouldn't hear about the Holocaust. Many of them have never heard of it. Many of them don't know who a Jew is. They don't know anything other than their either Catholic upbringing or their Christian upbringing, which in many people's minds are two different things. Christians are like the born-again fundamental Pentecostal type Christians, and Catholics are different, so they view those as the two major religions. So we often have an education about just what it means to be a Christian. And through my work with the Holocaust, I'm a museum teacher fellow for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I run workshops here in Denver geared for teachers. I've created a lesson that's going to be on a website in the Holocaust Memorial Museum that talks about the progression of citizen to outcast. Many teachers, as we're pushed for time and don't have a lot of resources, we tend to give kids things like night, plop them down in 1942 in a concentration camp with no background information as to how a concentration camp could be possible. So my education with students focuses a lot on pre-33 and 33 to 38, and so how something later when they hear in high school about concentration camps and read a book like Night, they understand the background of how something like that could come to be. In my work with teachers, I do the same thing. I'm a member of the National Holocaust Consortium, and we published a book 2 years ago called The Call of Memory, and I'm the only teacher who has a middle school lesson for inner city students in the book, and I'm very proud of my students for stepping up to be able to make that lesson possible. I feel teaching about the Holocaust is obviously really important, not just Holocaust, genocide studies, making connections to present day issues that are happening in our world and giving children things that they can act on. The evolution of going to D.C. with my students and refining how I take them through the Holocaust Memorial Museum because they're so young, and then taking 8th graders to the Anne Frank house and just working on that and how to make effective education for the 12 to 14-year-old without terrifying them and making sure it's age appropriate has really been a journey and something I'm still working on, because I think many times as educators we tend to just throw at them whatever we have, not that we're trying to be mean, but we don't really think about the implications of what we're teaching kids and how that can inspire them. So interestingly, since we've been going to Europe for 8 years, and most of the kids who go to Europe with me go to DC, and they work to raise all their money. I too have created a nonprofit organization that tries to support them. It's called Keep Denver. Well, Keep, but our website is keepdenver.org, and we ask people to donate money, and then the kids earn that money to be able to travel. And it's also to inspire them, to give them something else out of their immediate neighborhood. Most people in poverty tend to travel in a 5 to 10 mile radius, and generally people of poverty tend to think locally, middle class thinks nationally, and wealth thinks internationally. I'd like to expose my children to all 3 classes before they leave middle school so they can be inspired to go on. But now I have a group of high school students who are already raising money. They don't know where I'll take them, but they want me to take them to Eastern Europe, and they want to go to Poland, they want to go to Germany, and they want to go to the Czech Republic and Austria, and they're raising money and I haven't even planned a trip. So it's exciting, but they themselves are now becoming leaders in their classrooms to want their teachers to teach them more about the Holocaust. And if they just throw in Schindler's List on the Friday before school's out, the kids will say, and what else are we going to learn about this? We can't just watch Schindler's List. There's more to it than that. It was 1993, and I had not ever taught the Diary of Anne Frank, and I had not ever taught anything about the Holocaust because it was elementary school, and I always thought elementary school was too young. But then the competition came out and said, no, we'll have the Anne Frank competition. I think at that time they had a category 3rd through 5th grade, and then 6th through 8th, and then high school or something. I don't remember how it went, but I remember it was aimed more for 5th graders. So I introduced, I had some picture books on Anne Frank, and I had the topic, and many kids had never heard of it before, and I still have that. I still have kids, even though it's 2009, and there's been an explosion of literature and books since Schindler's List has come out, but I still have kids who've never heard about the Holocaust. I still have kids who've never heard about any religion other than their own, really. Although they've heard more about being a Muslim because of after 9/11, a lot of kids are more familiar with the Islamic traditions than they are with Judaic traditions. So I try and expose them to everything. It's hard because I'm a public school, but it's so much, it's all tied together. September 12th, 2001 is when I got the first invitation to be part of the National Holocaust Consortium that sponsors the International Book Sharing Project. And what that project does is my kids are matched with a classroom in Israel, and the kids in Israel read the same book about the Holocaust that my students do, and then they discuss it online. And in the classroom in Israel, there can be children who are Muslim, there can be children who are from Russia who are Christian, there are Ethiopian children, and then my children are just all Hispanic, although that's the dominant group in our neighborhood. I've had kids who are Cambodian, Vietnamese, Anglo, African American. This year I have a boy from the Sudan. Last year I had a boy from Ethiopia. And then they get paired with each other online and they start talking about the Holocaust, but from two entirely different points of view in the world. And they weekly converse back and forth. The teachers and I read a certain set with our kids. Like we'll say, we're going to read chapters 1 through 3, and we're going to discuss these 3 questions. Then we put the 3 questions on the website, and then the kids get on, they find their partner's forum, and they write to their partner in Israel back and forth. And I think that's a real eye-opener for my students who maybe haven't been out of this immediate neighborhood a lot, to hear that there's a kid in Israel who also, loves TI and has this same idea about his brother, sister, and then shares this view about the Holocaust, someone who they've never met. And they have all these things in common. And I think, there's a saying, I don't know who said it, travel is death to prejudice. I think any international interaction outside your area can be death to prejudice, because you start to begin to realize there's people all around the world who hate their parents at this time in life, just like you do, and who love TI and can't stand to listen to anything else, and wish their parents would buy them an iPhone. And why can't they have a Wii, and why can't they have a TV in their bedroom? And yet they're sitting over there in Israel, far away, speaking a language they don't know. So we have these parents who maybe are from Mexico or from another country, or maybe even from here, and they haven't heard about the Holocaust. And their kids come home and start telling them, do you know this happened? Do you know this happened? And I never thought about the impact of what the kids go home and say to their parents. I'm so focused on my classroom until we were speaking at a synagogue 2 years ago, and a member of the audience asked one of the panel of the kids that I brought, she asked Alexis, and this audience member asked Alexis particularly because her cousin Marina was there too. She said, well, what has the impact been on your family? And I never thought this. She said, oh, well, now we're all reading the Diary of Anne Frank. I was like, what do you mean? I even said, what do you mean? She said, oh, well, Marina and I came home and said, this is an amazing book. And the family finally said, well, we've never read it. Can we read it? And they're passing around the Diary of Anne Frank to the adults in the family. And they're all reading it and discussing it. And they decided The Kite Runner was going to be the next book that they were going to read, because that's what Alexis had chosen to read next, and she said it's really powerful and it'll teach you about what's out in our world. And I never thought about how what I was teaching the kids about the Holocaust was translating into their families.